All
You
right.
got it.
All right. So we're going to get rolling. Welcome. We're just calling this the U.S. Track and Field Race Walking Clinic for officials because there's people from all over the country, but it was originally asked for out of Oregon. And Marie, did you want to say something before we started?
Yep, I can just say a couple things. Appreciate everybody joining. And last year, this was such a hit, we decided we wanted to do it again. And I'm very grateful for both Jeff and Gary agreeing to do that. And Jeff told me there's some tweaks to the content from last year, but there'll be probably quite a bit of similar content, but good refresher for all of us. And as we were talking about before most people joined, we really need race walk officials. And so what I'm hoping is that we will have people that are certified officials already that will be inspired to learn more about race walk officiating or become one. Our certification chair in Oregon actually helped me at a meet a couple of weeks ago, so that was great. And add it to your toolbox if you are an official, or become an official if you're not already one. So I'll just, with that, just going to hand it back over to you, Jeff and Gary.
Okay, great. So
Thank you.
Gary predates me by quite a lot, both as coach, athlete, and official. Oh, hang on. There we go. So Gary was a former, it was IAAF back then, now it's World Athletics, the highest level official in the world. I am a NACAC international judge, which is a step below that. Gary's now a World Athletics lecturer, so he has been teaching the people who are going to be the World Athletics.
I became too old to be a judge.
I didn't want to say that.
The World Athletics has different rules, which they would not get away with in the United States, but that's the way it is.
And Gary was my mentor, was my mentor. He took me from a fledgling high school senior and taught me all the basics and all the advanced stuff of race walking over not just years, but decades. So we've written books together, we've given lectures together, we make a nice team. With that said, let's jump into it. So race walking has been an Olympic event since 1904, and we're going to kind of go through the basics, even though many of us know them, because it helps to give us a grounding for our talk on how to officiate. Because if you don't know what race walking is from kind of a fundamental level, it's kind of hard to understand the judging. Okay.
The race that picture was showing, can you go back, Jeff?
Sure.
The Coney Island Walk has been going on for well over 100 years. And it wasn't until the 1960s, the mid 1960s, that they just put it on the boardwalk at Coney Island. It used to be from City Hall out to Coney Island. And you can see this motley crew here. Roads were not closed, but then again, people didn't drive as fast. But they took their life in their hands, I'm sure. But anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
No worries. So this was actually a t-shirt I made a long time ago that I hired one of my students to draw. And it just sort of illustrates the evolution of race walking. When I started researching race walking and writing, the early rules were all about dress and what it looked like. And the dress dictated technique. And then over time, athleticism dictated technique. And I think the last rule change was around 1996. And for a while, people were like, oh, well, today's race walkers aren't race walkers because they didn't walk the way I did. Well, if any 30, 40-year period, there was a change in the rules and people had to adapt. So athletes have to adapt, and so do officials. And many of us are old enough to have been around in those previous rules. So we're going to start really right at the beginning and say, what is race walking and how is it distinct from running? And also along with that, we'll also look at the difference between running and kind of normal walking. So we're going to look at videos first, just say, of a group of runners. All right.
Okay.
And
Jeff, there's one point that we need to stress. Race walking is not normal walking. It's distinct from it. So
correct.
Get that in your head. It's not running, it's not walking, it's something in between.
Okay, so let's just start by looking at the runners. Okay, and these runners might look a little more like a race walker because they all finished race walking. But you see the knee bent, you see a flight phase that would be visible to the human eye. Why don't we run through that just one more time?
Focus on the guy in the red shorts in the back. You can see his loss of contact is very distinct.
Okay, and obviously we're showing a lot of video in slow-mo for a number of reasons. One is so you can see it clearly, but the other is because of Zoom. Zoom doesn't have a fast frame rate anyway. If we continue, now let's look at a group of pedestrians. And when we say pedestrians, that's what Gary meant by the distinction between regular walking and race walking. So pedestrians would not be acceptable in a race walk. And we see that they walk, they don't have loss of contact. They have visible contact with the ground, but their knee is bent from the moment of contact and it stays bent pretty much past vertical. And there are no rules to pedestrianism. So pretty much it's a go as you please and do whatever you want. But they don't follow the definition of race walking. Okay, so now we'll look at a group of slow race walkers. And slow race walkers follow the definition of race walking, so do faster race walkers, but we will see differences between them. So here they're walking. You can see their leg fully extend and basically be straightened through the moment of contact through vertical. What is distinctive about slower race walkers is you could probably see a visible contact with the ground. So both feet are in contact with the ground for an instant or more than an instant. And we can see that there isn't any loss of contact with certainty. Okay, so now we're going to look at a group of faster race walkers.
Coming from the left.
Yep. And these were not in slow-mo because we just wanted to show you that when they're faster, now we go to slow, but when they're faster, you probably can't see the loss of contact. But if you freeze it, almost every elite 20K race walker is going to have some loss of contact. And we'll go into what the rule is in a minute, but basically it's visible loss of contact that we're looking for that separates a legal race walker from an illegal race walker. So let's just look at that one more time. And at full speed, it's almost impossible to see on video. There's also video artifacts that make it more difficult because you could actually see kind of 2 feet at the same time.
And Zoom is not letting you really do a good fast video.
Yeah, at the end of the clinic, we'll talk about a test that Gary, I, and David Harriman have been developing. And it works because we have specialized monitors that can really show the high frame rate. But over Zoom, you can't test somebody on visible loss of contact. Okay, so now let's look at it in a little more refinement by looking at one runner and one race walker side by side so we can see that distinction. So here you see the race walker. You see the leg fully extended and staying straightened through vertical. And then you see the runner landing on the bent knee and staying bent through vertical. You also see the runner with both feet off the ground and visibly see both feet off the ground. So let's just watch that one more time. Okay. So now we're going to look at a single pedestrian and many race walkers. So you should try to pick out the pedestrian as quickly as you can. Oh, well, that shouldn't be too hard. All right, here we go. Okay, you see he's got visible contact with the ground in the back, but he's not straightening his leg as is part of the definition of race walking.
You're talking about the guy with the red hat,
Correct.
Alan.
We do not make fun of Alan,
I'm sorry.
not while we're recording. I see you forgot that there was a yellow arrow coming. Okay. All right, so now let's look at a single runner and many race walkers. So this just gives us a good visual of what the different styles look like. Right, you can see the visible loss of contact in the runner, and you can see the bent knee in the runner. Obviously, it's easier to see in slow motion. Okay, now we're just going to look at a single race walker. Okay, you see the leg fully extend, it stays straightened. Okay, show that one more time. And in slow motion, you might see the visible loss of contact, but at full speed, you would not. Okay, so now we have a group of race walkers.
Different.
They should be coming. Or not. Seriously.
They're all DQ'd.
Yeah. They stop for donuts.
No, they're in the penalty zone.
No, they're in traffic
In
court.
penalties.
There's actually a traffic court building right next door. So somebody pointed out the irony this year. I thought that was pretty funny. All right. So now let's kind of go into the formalities now that you have seen it and you know what you're looking at. So this is the official US track and field definition. It's that race walking is a progression of steps so taken that the walker makes contact with the ground so that no visible to the human eye loss of contact occurs. And we'll look at this in more detail, but we're basically saying it has to be visible to the human eye. So when we take pictures and we see a loss of contact, that does not mean that the walker was illegal. And I have spent way too much time videoing race walkers, and Gary, David, and myself have spent way too much time analyzing those videos to see that walkers are off the ground a lot more than we think they are, even when they're not visible to the human eye. So don't get fooled like, oh, you officiated, then you looked at a video or you looked at a still frame and you go, oh, I could see air. I made a mistake. I should have given them a call. It's a significant loss of contact before you can actually see visible loss of contact. The other part of the definition is the advancing leg must be straightened, i.e. not bent at the knee from the moment of first contact with the ground until in the vertical upright position. And we'll go into the subtleties of judging the second, but it's very, very important when you judge for the leg being straightened that you wait until the foot strikes the ground. So we're going to dissect this piece by piece. And first, we're just going to look at a group of, this was actually out in California. A lot of these were Olympians or Olympic hopefuls. Just training. This is just their easy walk. Right. But we see nice, smooth, good race walking technique. Okay. If they were racing, they would be significantly more off the ground than what we're seeing here. Okay. So let's start by what I would call the classic image that we have of a race walker, which was what race walking was defined at pre-1996, was that you had to have no loss of contact and that there was a momentary double support phase. When we put these slides together, I don't know, I'd taken 50,000, 100,000 photos, and these were the only 3 elite walkers that I could find with a momentary double support phase. And frankly, they weren't in 20Ks. And the guy in the middle isn't really elite, even though we like him. It was very, very hard to find anybody with visible contact, even on a video or a still, because it just doesn't happen. So while this looks nice for a picture and it is, quote, textbook from pre-1996, you're not going to actually see this in elite competition today. So if we look at no loss of contact, right, we see Miranda here, and Miranda was not racing. This was taken literally around the corner from me. I had her come out and we videoed her at different levels of contact. So this is her slowing it down. And if we watch it, oh, I thought that was a video, guess not. We would see a moment where both feet are on the ground. Okay, then you get to where if she goes a little bit faster, that there would be slight loss of contact. So there's just a little bit of air under the left heel and a little bit of air under the right. You could barely see it. It certainly isn't visible to the human eye while you're race walking. Okay, and I sort of measured it here, right, where you could see just that little gap of yellow between the foot and the ground. Okay, it's only one frame, so it's fine. All right, as we start to increase the amount of loss of contact, we could see that there is a little bit more loss of contact here, both in the front and the back. You still couldn't see it to the human eye. Okay, and if you just looked at it still, you go, wow, that's a lot of loss of contact. I can assure you it is not. Okay. It's very subjective, but someone with good technique can easily be off the ground 0.04 to 0.05 or 40 to 50 milliseconds or even more and still appear to have visible contact, right? Because we're not looking, I should rephrase that. We're not looking for visible contact. We're looking for visible loss of contact. And those are two very different things. So we're not saying that we see visible contact. We're saying that we give the benefit of the doubt to the athlete, and we don't see visible loss of contact. So she was legal on the camera I was using was 240 frames per second, right? Under 40 milliseconds, 9 frames on the camera, completely legal. Okay, here we see somebody, he was actually disqualified in this race, and he was pretty high flying when he did this. And so we see there's significantly more loss of contact both in front and behind. And the important thing was to the human eye, it looked very visible. And Gary, I don't think I told you this, but I was talking to Nick about our findings. And he said that the people in Great Britain train solely by measuring the milliseconds of loss of contact on a treadmill, and they don't take style or technique into account.
Really?
So this is all hearsay because this is what I was told. But, you know, Tom does pick up a lot of calls and get disqualified for a reasonable amount of time. And if they're solely worrying about milliseconds of loss of contact and not how they look, they're doing themselves a disservice. Okay, someone's chatting.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, I figured it was you.
What was that, Tom in London?
I said I figured it was you.
No, was that Tom in London that was DQ?
Yes, yes, it was.
We were there to see that. He broke down in tears.
I'm sure. All right, so let's keep looking.
When I work with young athletes, and we have the walk in the high schools on Long Island, many of the girls are too legal, and I tell them that, and then I explain the definition to them, and I try to get them so that they come up a little bit and actually come off the ground to the extent that you can't see it, but they end up walking a lot faster. And it's that efficiency of motion once you get a slight flight phase that allows walkers to go much faster than if they're so solely planted on the ground and too legal.
And it's good from an efficiency perspective. It's also good to a degree from a health perspective, because when you plant that front foot and you're pushing off the back foot, your front foot's acting like a brake. So it is possible for someone to be too legal, but that doesn't affect how we judge. Okay, now I have actually the videos to watch this in motion. So on the left, we have visible contact. On the right, we have momentary contact. And again, your mileage will vary on Zoom. But it's pretty easy to see that Miranda's in contact with the ground at all times on the left. On the right, very hard to tell. Okay. Now we're going to look at a slight loss of contact in slow motion. So obviously at 240 frames per second, we can see that. But in real life, we cannot. And Miranda is so legal. Look at her arms. She's completely overstriding. Because I was like, come on, get off the ground as much as you can. And at full speed, I still couldn't see it. Okay. Now we're going to look at a slight flight phase, a significant flight phase, and excessive. And Miranda is really not that excessive. But it's very, very hard to tell, and especially on Zoom and video. Okay. If you look at it in stills, right, you can see elite walkers with significant visible loss of contact, right? And we just want to stress again that the human eye can pick this up. I don't believe either of them were actually disqualified in the race. All right, but now we get to something very interesting, which literally last week at Penn Relays, or 2 weeks ago at Penn Relays, we had these two walkers in the race. One broke the American record, looked fantastic. The other one got disqualified. Okay, so if we just look at this picture, who looks more off the ground than the other one? Anyone want to chime in?
Number 16.
Okay, so 16 looks like he's slightly more off the ground than number 22. And that is, depending where they were in the race, might be correct. All right, so let's actually look at them through the stride. Okay, and if we look at this part of the stride, right, we see them both kind of about to lose contact with the rear foot. They come forward. They both have loss of contact, right, for a couple of frames. This was shot at 120 frames per second, not the 240 that we were doing otherwise. You can see 16 looks a little more off the ground, especially in the rightmost picture. Okay, we finished the stride. Okay, but I would say if we just look quickly, they look within range of each other. Okay, and that's until we get to here. And this was very eye-opening because they were off relatively the same amount. I think Nick was off a little more, but he was going, I shouldn't have said Nick, but I think it's obvious. 16 was off the ground a little more, but he was going 10% faster. So that would account for seeing about the same thing, except look at how number 16's foot stays closer to the ground than number 22's. And look at the angle of the shin on 22 versus 16. So Dave and I measured this, right? And that difference was the major reason why 22 picked up 4 red cards and 16 never got even a yellow paddle. And I was officiating, and I was shocked at how much 16 was off the ground because he was off over 50 milliseconds, but he looked nailed to the ground doing it. And it's because his foot came. It's because his foot came through. This is a very rough estimate, but about 3 inches off the ground compared to 22's foot, which was about 6 inches off the ground, which is very, very high. So what does all that mean? Let's take a look at it in a video. Okay, and we're looking at this in slow motion, but you can see the trailing foot come up higher on 22. And that's what's allowing us to see visible loss of contact. So it's not just how much you're off the ground, it's how you're off the ground. And there's really no other conclusion you can make from this other than to some degree it is a beauty contest. And that we don't just judge solely by style. You don't want to say, oh, I saw a head bobbing, therefore I'm going to give a call. That's certainly a no-no, right? But if we're looking at the feet and one foot is coming up higher off the ground, it's going to allow us to see that loss of contact easier than someone that keeps their feet lower. So we don't want to judge by style, but we have to admit that style affects how we judge. Okay. All right, give me one sec. Okay, so any questions, or Gary, you want to add anything about loss of contact before we move on to straighten knee?
No, I think the concept of race walking being a beauty contest is something that I tell athletes. I think judges need to be aware of the fact that some people's technique is so smooth and so, quote, beautiful, that they can push the limits, and the limits are greater than 40 milliseconds of loss of contact. If the contact is very smooth and there's no extraneous movements that get the judges concentrating on that athlete, they can push the limits and go fast. And I don't want to say get away with it, but yes, they get away with it.
Well, I'll pile on to that because I was staring at the American record there every single lap that went by. There was nobody near him, right? So I was looking, and I firmly believed that after the race, when I looked at the video, that I would have seen only 20 to 30 milliseconds loss of contact. So even with heavy scrutiny, if your style is strong and good, you will not appear to have visible loss of contact. And if we don't see visible loss of contact, we shouldn't call it.
That's important. You don't call it.
Okay, so let's now get.
Before you go on, the one thing I noticed between these two walkers is that the person you're calling the slower walker had his body ahead. Stop right here. Look how his right shoulder is ahead compared to the other walker.
Sure.
The walker in red, his upper body is slower, is behind in time.
Yep.
This may be what is giving you the impression of him being a smoother walker, is that he doesn't have a part that's getting in front.
So there's a lot to it, right? And also look at the arms, right? Number 16's arm carriage is much lower. But what I was trying to do, and I always try to do as a judge, is basically look waist down. So biomechanically, if the torso is rotating more in 22, perhaps other things are going on, hip rotation and other things that are affecting that style. Whatever it is, 22's been doing this for a while, and his foot always comes up high. So there's something about his technique that is preventing him from lowering that. All righty. All right, so the other half of the definition is that the leg must be extended from the moment of first contact until passing under. Basically, you're walking with a straightened knee. It doesn't mean to walk with your legs straight all the time. I pulled these two out because Jack was my superstar back in the day, but he's like 91, maybe 93 now. And although he has a little knobby knee, which we're not judging, his leg extended, his heel struck the ground. When the heel strikes the ground, we judge, and it stayed extended from the moment of first contact with the ground until in the vertical upright position. Okay, a lot of people coming from running struggle with this part of the definition, especially any of the beginning walkers, because it's not something that they normally do. And some masters will say, well, I can't do it. Well, in some competitions now, right, they have power walking or speed walking instead of race walking. If you're going to race walk, you have to comply to the definition. All right, we can look at this as a series of pictures where Miranda lands and her leg is already fully extended. It stays extended until in the vertical position. And most elite walkers will keep their leg extended beyond vertical. And then when they're kind of come up onto the ball of their foot, the knee bends and then they start to swing forward. Okay, people can violate this rule a lot of different ways. Okay, oh, sorry, we've got a few other images. I got ahead of myself. So at heel strike, the toe is pointed, roughly 30 degrees or so angle between the foot and the bottom of the ground. The rear leg is obviously bent. Arm should come up to about the sternum. Hand should come behind the hip. None of what I'm talking about with the hands and the arms has anything to do with judging, but that's what a typical elite race walker would do. Okay, they come through, the leg stays straightened. It stays straightened through vertical. And then it stays straightened beyond vertical. We see the heel come up off the ground. The leg is still straight. Now, at this point, you don't need to do this for judging. As a coach, I coach people both from a strength perspective and a legality perspective that if you keep that leg straightened past vertical, it's going to look straightened. If somebody bends their knee right at vertical, they're legal, but what does a judge see? And then that comes back to the style and the beauty contest, and that people might not look as legal as they could. Okay, and then obviously it has to bend before it comes forward, and it bends as it swings forward. So we can see all of that again. Okay, so that's legal race walking. Now let's look at illegal race walking. This walker lands with a bent knee, and then he straightens past vertical. So that is not legal. You're judging from the moment the heel strikes the ground. And if he's bending his knee all the way through and then straightening past vertical, that is not legal.
And
So-
he's, Jeff, if you can go back.
I'm going to show
He's-
the video.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, just the point that he was supporting his body over a bent knee. A bent leg was supporting his body.
Mhm.
Mechanically, totally different than what race walkers have to do.
And you can see that once we hit the slowdown. Right, and then you see he straightens later, but that's too late for the definition of race walking. Okay, then we see the opposite. This person lands with a fully extended straightened leg, but he lands so far in front of his body that he can't maintain that straightened leg when the weight comes down on it, and his knee bends as he comes through. So you can see as he progresses, the leg bends. Okay, now there are other types of bends in legs, which is why we don't like to say your knee must be straight. Okay, because if you look at four-time Olympic gold medalist Robert Korzenowski there, he's got a very bow-legged leg. So I wouldn't say that his leg was straight, but I would say that he was legally race walking. So basically, you're looking for a line from the ankle to the knee to the hip to line up and be straight. And that's from the side. We'll talk about where you should judge from in a little bit. You also want to ignore knobby knees. The leg that we're looking at on the left is fully extended. It hasn't hit the ground yet. It's fully extended, but that knee is very knobby. We also will see a case where people bend beyond vertical, beyond 90 degrees, and they hyperextend, and that's okay as well. So let's look at a straightened leg in slow motion and how good it looks. Okay, And in comparison, this might be me. Schlubbing along, trying to race walk, but not exactly right. So you see I land with a little bit of a bent knee. I'm still bent when I'm supporting my weight, and I stay bent throughout. And that's a clear violation of the definition of race walking. Okay, and this is very important, so we're going to reiterate it again. You judge the knee, the straightened part of the knee, after heel strike, not before. So if the leg is in the air, like number 7, you're not calling her for bent knee because she has not yet struck the ground. All right, number 2, upon striking the ground, you can see the leg is fully extended and they're all legally race walking. All right, so these are also some new videos that we pulled from the Penn Relays. And these are very legal race walkers who have a different style. And again, we're not supposed to be judging on style. It may affect us, but we should not be looking at the head unless we're like looking from afar and saying, oh, I see someone who's bouncy. When they come by, I'm going to look at their feet and legs more closely. But we're not judging from looking at a head or a bouncy hair or things like that. So I think if memory serves me correct, oh no, this one was great. So this is someone who's literally landing flat foot. So very different than every other race walker I have ever photographed. Right, her toe does not point up like a normal walker. But if
She
you
also
look,
doesn't rotate her hips.
but if you look at it, she's completely legal. Right, so we don't want to say, oh, I don't see a toe pointed, I'm going to give her a call for bent knee. We're looking at the knee, and I don't think to the judges panel on at this race, I don't think anybody gave her a bent knee call, right? But she was clearly doing something different than everybody else. All right, and I videoed a lot of people, and I've never seen that in someone going this fast. Now this is just a close up. You also see a lot of pronation. Okay, the next girl. Okay, legal or illegal? Anybody?
Legal.
Okay, not a question that she's legal, right? Very good lower body. If we watch her from the upper body, okay, you can see the arms jumping up and down. You can see the head jumping up and down. You see the hair flopping. None of that means that she's not legal, right? She's as close to having momentary contact as just about anyone can be, right? So again, it's important for us that we don't judge solely on style, but we do realize that style affects how we judge. So that's kind of it on the legal versus illegal. And now we're going to jump into more of the mechanics of judging, where you judge from and how you actually do the judging. So typically when you judge, there are 2 broad categories. One is being on a track and one is being on a road course. On a track, both courses you divide up into zones. Depending whether you are in the US or international, you might have a different number of judges. On a track, typically in the US, we have 5 judges. On a road course, we have more. Typically on a track, on shorter races, we do not rotate. But on a road course, especially on a longer race, we do rotate. Gary,
and this track diagram is actually for somebody, for the judging of a 1,500 meter race walk. So number 1, who is the chief judge, is over at the start, watching it the same way Judge 2 is. The idea is that you divide the track into 4 quarters, and sometimes it's a part, in this diagram, it's a partial straightaway and a partial turn. Or you could do a turn and straightaways, and the chief judge, who would be number one, moves around and tries to get to the finish, be on the finish straightaway in time for the end of the race. In the road course, it's dependent upon what the course looks like. This isn't a course that begins in a stadium, goes out, goes around a loop multiple times, and then goes back again. And it's complicated, but it becomes relatively simple once you know, you get that, you know what the course is, and you know who your judges are, and you just divide it up so they're in proportionally the same amount of territory that they have to cover.
And worst case, if you forget, some judge rotates into your section, you go, whoops, time to move forward. I'm not speaking from personal experience, of course.
Right. We've all done it.
I know. And it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Okay. This is very, very important. And I was taught correctly from the beginning on how to judge. But that said, when Dave Harriman and I spent the time putting the race walking test together through computer animation, where you can look at it at different angles, it really highlighted to me how bad race walkers look when they're not in the proper judging zone. So if a race walker is coming, say, from left to right, we judge 45 degrees from where we are as they come towards us and 15 degrees past us. If you let them go too far beyond you, everybody looks illegal. And, you know, translating video animation to real life, it's amazing how different they look once they get out of that judging zone. How far back you stand, it's roughly 5 meters, which is 15 feet. I vary that distance depending on the course, depending on who I'm looking at, what I'm looking for. But you should pretty much plant yourself and not be moving back and forth as the race walkers are going. You watch them come by, go into your zone, and come out of your zone.
And sometimes if you are trying to make your mind up on a walker, the judge could move off to the right while the walkers are moving to the right, maintaining that 45-degree angle. Although they're going to be going a lot faster than you, so you shouldn't be running after them, but you might move a little bit just to, if you're trying to make up your mind.
You could buy yourself a second or two,
Yeah.
is what you're saying. Okay. All right.
You already gave the answer to that question.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
forgot.
know.
I forgot to look ahead there. All right. So a judge has 2 paddles, one for bent knee and one for loss of contact. You give one of these yellow paddles when you believe somebody is in danger of violating either part of the definition. Philosophy changes depending on kind of where you are and what the race is. But when we judge internationally, wherever possible, when it's not completely egregious, we try to give an athlete a yellow paddle before writing a red card. Now, of course, if someone blatantly is running past you on the first lap and getting a ridiculous advantage, you can go right to the red card, show them the yellow paddle. But in most cases, that's not the case. And often giving a yellow paddle allows an athlete to correct themselves. So if you can, you give the yellow paddle. And then the next time they come by, if they're still in violation, you go to a red
Now,
card.
Jeff, can you go back to that picture?
Yep.
I have no idea where this is, but I think that's me.
I do think it's you.
Yeah, but I don't remember the race, but then I don't remember a lot of things. How do you give the yellow paddle when there are 3 or 4 walkers? What I have normally done is that I will hold the paddle, instead of facing the symbol towards the walker, I will turn the paddle as if I'm pointing, and I will point to the walker. When I make eye contact, then I show him the paddle. And And that seems to be able to take care of it when giving the yellow paddle when there's a group of walkers. God only knows what I've done when there's been a group of 20 walkers. But that's a totally different story.
It's also different if you're in a race where everybody speaks English and you can shout out 25 bent knee.
Yeah.
Right. Versus an international competition where you don't know what language they're speaking. Okay.
They always show the judge in front of the walker like this. And most judges that I know of make up their mind as the walker goes by. So by the time they have the paddle in their hand, the walker is already even with them or past them. So what is the judge supposed to do? The book says we aren't supposed to run after them, but if I'm going to give them the paddle on the same lap as I observed it, then I don't have much else choice.
And that is true. Running after them within reason. I think jogging a few steps to give the paddle, but you know, the way race walking is done on laps, on loops, where you see them multiple times, and many times you might even see them on the other side of the course. I will look for that athlete as they're coming by, and if it looks like they haven't changed anything, I'll show them the paddle. If they have changed, don't show them the paddle because they don't deserve it.
So I've done a few things, and the last road race we were on, Gary, was by you, and it's possible to see somebody on that course 4 times on one lap, right? And I was not healthy at that race. I was recovering from this weird vertigo. So I was not as fast, and I was not going to, as you say, be able to get out in front of the walker. So I would just wait till the walker came by again. And Gary, I don't know how you feel about this, but I would say, bent knee, you know, last time you went by me or something. Now, in an American race, you can talk. You can't do that, obviously, internationally, but I always look at it as I'm trying to give the best information to the athlete as possible. And I want to follow that spirit as best as I can. So I think, Bruce, if you had to take a few steps to get them that information, I think your heart and soul is in the right place, but don't chase them down, for 30 feet, right? Better just to wait for them to come by if you can't get them that quickly.
What's important though, if the athlete has corrected, maybe they've gotten yellow paddles from other judges, maybe they've gotten a markup on the board, which we'll talk about later. In which case, showing them the yellow paddle when they're not in danger is really not called for, and we should avoid doing that. If the athlete has corrected, what good is it to show them a yellow paddle?
All right, so speaking of the next thing, right, we have red cards. Red cards are a proposal for disqualification, okay? I think it's important to realize, especially for beginning judges, that if you're wrong and you're the only one that's wrong, the walker's not getting disqualified, right? So if in your best judgment, you believe that the walker is in violation of the definition, you've given them a yellow paddle, they have not corrected it, you write a red card. You have to fill out all the information properly, the walker's bib number, put the time, hours and minutes of during the day that the disqualification proposal is occurring, whether or not it's loss of contact or bent knee. You put your judge's number, which is given to you the morning of the race, and then you sign the signature. Then somebody called a runner will come by to pick the cards up, collect them, and then they'll be recorded. You cannot give a second red card, even if it's for a different violation. Okay, they have changed the rule. It used to be that if there were 3 proposals for disqualification, you were disqualified, but now many races employ a penalty zone. So if there is a penalty zone and you get 3 proposals for disqualification, the athlete is sent into a penalty zone to serve a time penalty. Depending on the distance of the race, less than or equal to 5 kilometers, it's 30 seconds. and then it proportionally goes up to 5 minutes at 50K. If there's no penalty zone, when you get 3 cards from 3 different judges, the athlete is disqualified. All right, only the chief judge or the chief judge's assistant can notify the athlete, and they notify the athlete with a red paddle.
It's important to note that if the cards come in, the athlete is disqualified. If 4 cards or 3 cards have been written on the athlete, if you don't have the penalty zone, the athlete is disqualified. Even if they have decided to stop before the judge, the chief judge or chief judge's assistant can notify them, they are disqualified. And that we had that happen at the 20K where we had an athlete who stopped, and he had picked up 4 red cards, 5 red cards. He hadn't even gotten into the penalty zone, but he was listed as disqualified.
Okay, then there's paperwork that goes along with your judging. One is filling out the judge's tally sheet, and we have videos on this that I'll show you at the end that we won't go into total details here, but that will teach you how to fill out all this. And there are videos in the works as well, filling out some of the paperwork we haven't covered yet. But a tally sheet is filled out by a judge. You put out the initial information at the top, which is, the date of the race, the time it starts, what the competition is, what your judge number is. And then you record both your yellow paddles and your red cards as the race progresses. And at the end of the race, you sign it and turn it into the recorder.
One of the purposes of this tally sheet is so that you have your own record, so that you don't give a second yellow paddle for the same violation, or you don't give a second red card on the athlete. And if you didn't have the tally sheet, that would happen. Sometimes when there are lots of walkers in the race and you repeat the number, oh my goodness, look what I did. Well, that's why you probably want to do it in pencil.
And you don't want to harass a walker, right? Giving them a yellow paddle lets them know what you think, and then you move on. Okay, and it's important that if you've given a red card to an athlete and they come by you, continue to watch them, even if you're not, quote, judging them, because otherwise they'll know that you gave them a red card, or they'll assume you gave them a red card, and maybe then they actually intentionally go by you off the ground. So you don't want to play your hand, so to speak. The red cards arrive to a recorder. The recorder places it in a summary sheet. And then the red cards get listed on a DQ board or a posting board where the competitor sees their number and the violations they have against them. Do you want to say anything more about that, Gary, before I move on? Or
no, and this summary sheet and the DQ board are not from the same race. So if you're looking to see how come number 8's not on the summary sheet, it's because it's from a different race. And normally, if you go back, the symbols that we use should have the bent knee or loss of contact in the center of the red dot, of the red circle, because sometimes it's hard to see that infraction. There are times when we don't have red circles, and so we put the infraction up there, and it becomes by hand, and it becomes important that we try to be neat with it so that the athletes can understand what's going on.
yeah, and you'll see a lot of variation in what they look like. We're trying to standardize on a UASTF race walking summary sheet, which will mirror the international summary sheet as much as possible. And then, like we said, you've got the DQ board that shows what's going on. Bottom line, if athletes are walking within the definition, judges take no action, right? Give the benefit of the doubt and only call what you can see. All right. Some things to fill out what we've got. there are different categories of race walking officials. So there's the judges that make decisions about the athlete's adherence to the definition of race walking. On a road course is a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 9. On a track, there are 5 that includes the chief judge. The chief judge supervises all the judges. He also has the power to DQ in the last 100 meters of a national championship or an international trial race. And while in the US, they also act as a regular judge during the competition. Only a judge that can give they are the only judge that can give a red paddle, which is a notification of disqualification to the athlete. The chief judge's assistant relays DQs notifications to the chief judge.
And the chief judge assistant can also have a red paddle and notify the athlete of the disqualification. So I think we have to correct this for
Sure.
future use. The chief judge's assistant does not judge. That he helps the chief judge. And many times the chief judge could be out on the course somewhere, and because of timeliness, that chief judge's assistant has the power to show the red paddle to the athlete who is disqualified.
Okay, you also have a secretary and recorder that keeps track of the historical record of all judges' decisions that are reported during the event on a summary sheet. Then you have a posting board operator that puts up the red discs, and a penalty zone operator that controls the entry and exit of athletes in and out of the penalty zone. So in summary, right, in a typical race, most race walkers are within the rules, right? It should not be the case that you're giving a DQ call to every other walker. Most legitimate races have legal race walkers. Some walkers, of course, are in danger and should be cautioned. A few walkers may not be in the rules and should be disqualified. A yellow paddle is shown as a caution to a walker. A red card is written as your vote for disqualification. The red card is not shown to the walker. It's collected by a runner and then gets up on the tally card, the board, the DQ board. It takes red cards from 3 separate judges for a walker to be disqualified if no penalty zone is used. It takes red cards from 4 separate judges for a walker to be disqualified if a penalty zone is used. If the penalty zone is used, walkers may serve time penalties before disqualification or have time added to their final time. When you make calls, record the time of day on your tally sheets, not the time of the race. And this is a record of your calls. Importantly, act independently. Don't be influenced by others around you, which not only includes other judges, but fans, coaches, athletes, etc. You shouldn't be afraid to make calls, but again, make the calls with the benefit of the doubt going to the athlete. Remember, you are a member of a judging panel, so your call alone will never disqualify a race walker.
I'd like to emphasize points 1, 2, and 3 with the words most, some, and few. That's important. We're not out there to get people. We're there to have an honest playing field and allow the athletes to race without our getting in their way with so many calls that athletes become frustrated. If they're illegal, by all means, call them. If they're not, let them go, let them race.
Okay. So hopefully, I mean, most of the people here are already part of the clan, but people at home might be watching this later. Come join us. It's fun. A lot of group activities together. Want to thank Marianne Daniel, who's now World Athletics Level 3 judge, who provided some of the foundations of this presentation. Some of the photos came from Calvin Liu, and Dave Harriman, who's a USATF master official, has slaved for, I don't know, the last year and a half with me, 4 or 5 nights a week, an hour or 2 a night, putting material together for officiating. Okay, I want to briefly hop over to my website to show you guys what is there for race walking officiating. Okay, so if you come under, I clicked on videos up at the top and then judging videos. Okay. How to judge race walking is just a quick 15-minute video on how to officiate. Then we have a practice evaluation. This is actually race footage, where you're basically looking at walkers. Now, this isn't slow-mo because it's really the only way to look at it on normal equipment, but you're looking to see who has loss of contact and who is bent knee. And there are answers to this as well. Okay, I will replace this Zoom clinic here with the new one. So if you want to go back and see anything from today, it will be there. Then we have an animation, which basically takes you through the competitor bid numbers on the tally. Actually, you probably can't hear the sound. Oh, no, I did put sound on. Race starts. Observe the time in the center of the screen. So basically, it's explaining how to fill these pieces of paperwork out in detail, and it's done through computer animation.
And Jeff and David and Ian Watley have spent hours taking these animation characters that you can buy and turning them into race walkers. And they're getting to the point where we have created a very good product that I think, because it's animation, gets rid of anything where we have athletes that we know, and we can control the athletes without having to control the animation, without having to find video of people and just plug that into a video. So it's a work in progress that's only getting better.
Yeah, it's come a long way, baby. So we even have like videos that explain how you go in and out of a penalty zone. 10 seconds to go. The penalty zone assistant. We have a self-test for filling out a tally sheet. And I thought I had put it on here, but I guess I did not. So let me see if I can very quickly see. So we've created a test. I'm not going to show you the test. I'm going to show you a sample question. And this, of course, requires that I remember where I put it. Let's see. Okay. Sample question. So basically what the video does is it shows 3 walkers going by. It's a very simple question. Are they legal or illegal? If they're illegal, do you give a proposal for bent knee, or do you give a proposal for loss of contact? And the thing about it being an animation is it's very objective. We know exactly how far off the ground they are. We know exactly if their knee is bent, how many degrees it is. So it takes a lot of subjectiveness out of determining what the answers to a test should be. Anyone want to take a stab? I don't know if it's even washable. David, is it reasonable from what you know, or Gary, from the way you're watching it now, to judge this, or no?
Yeah, it looks like I can tell, but then also I was involved in it, so.
Okay. Anybody other than Gary and David want to take a guess as to who's legal and who's illegal in the pictures in the video?
Number 3 has a bent knee.
Yep. Right. So very clear. The other 2 are legal race walkers. Right. And this is a work in progress in terms of creating an exam. And, you know, being a college professor, computer science, race walking, you think they're different. They're not. We are learning about how to test race walking by giving the test to officials. And what we are coming down to is that there are calls, if they're all off the ground a little, and somebody makes a mistake and calls them for a red card for lifting when they're really a yellow paddle for lifting, but that's not an answer to the test, that's a minor error. if you give somebody a lifting call when they have visible contact but bent knee, that's a major error, right? So there's sort of a sliding scale right now on our answer key of how many points you lose based on how egregious the mistake was. But what we're really striving for is not to say, oh, Jeff, you just took the exam and you failed, but to say, Jeff, here's the pattern of mistakes that you made. Let's teach you why you're making those calls, and hopefully you could correct yourself so you stop making the incorrect calls. And very anecdotally, what I have seen from people who I respect and I work with, the mistakes that they make on video and through animation are very similar to calls that are inconsistent on tally sheets. So while animation looks different than video, it takes away all of the video artifacts from recording it. Playback, I can play this back at 144 frames a second. Very, very hard to get video at that speed. My camera that does film very, very quick, I do 120 frames per second at 4K. Just the camera costs $6,500. So we're not going to have a lot of video, even though that would be the gold standard, that's high quality enough to judge from. So animation really is the best choice for now. And COVID also dictated that, because we started this project by shooting video, and then COVID hit and there were no races to film. So we switched over to animation. Anyway, so that said, open the floor to questions.
Hey, Jeff and Gary, this is Marie. I asked this question last year. I think the instructions that the chief judge gives at the beginning of the race, is there a good like script that we might be able to put together for instructions?
You know, Marie, there probably should be, but there isn't.
Okay.
And
That
in many
will
cases,
go on the list of the.
yeah, that's
I
something
think
that we
that'd be
need
super
to do,
helpful.
because
Super helpful.
there are some, I know when I'm a chief judge, and if I have a national championship, I certainly don't go into the basic mechanics of judging of what's going to happen. I'll just tell them, note, you've got a DQ board. We're using the penalty zone. And we also, might be using the chief judge, with the power to disqualify in the last 100 meters. But I'm not going to go into every little thing that some chief judges do. And, particularly if you're at a track race, there are people saying, get this race going. Don't stand there blabbing to the people, let them race. But you're right. I think maybe someone needs to write it up, and we need to get it into the handbook.
Well, I'm going to suggest, Gary, that you write the first draft.
Okay.
And then we'll polish it and we'll publish it and get it out there. And Gary, to your point, I think there should be two scripts. One is for officials that are seasoned and know what they're doing, because even if you know what you're doing, there's stuff you need to be told, right? You need to be told what your starting position is, how you're rotating, how often you're rotating, right? Things like that. If you're officiating at a smaller meet and the officials are new, and God bless the general track and field officials who want to help out with race walking, but aren't that familiar with it, they may need that extra coaching. And then,
but Jeff, Marie was asking about the script that you give as a chief judge to the athletes.
Instructions.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I thought you were talking about the pre-race meeting.
No, that's something different.
Okay,
That's actually helpful too.
We need
That
both.
would be helpful too. We need both.
Yeah, we do.
So
Jeff, that would be another good video.
I am going to say right now we'll make that a script, and after we finish the summary sheet, and I might as well do a plug that since July I've been working on the ultimate PR piece for race walking, which probably will fail like every other PR piece, but I decided to combine my three biggest loves outside of my wife and family, which is computers, race walking, and Star Wars. And so I am making the epic Star Wars fan film. And I have 5 Olympians who face transferred, voice transfer into the animation, and who will do battle on the Death Star. But when I get done with all that, Gary, I'm going to be very tired. And I also want to do an animation on, I have a fairy tale on how race walking started. Because I think race walking has a unique niche in the artistic world, that if we did a cool fairy tale on race walking, I think that could get into film festivals. Right. I think we could expose race walking in worlds that we never expected to. And I don't know how many of you followed Glenn Austin Anderson, but he was a former junior race walker who quit, I think, after he was 19. Well, he has become a professor of videography, and he did an award-winning video documentary on Coogan's, the bar that everybody goes to after the Millrose Games. And it featured a bunch of race walkers in it as well, just because we happened to be there when he was filming. But odd ways that you could get promotion into the sport. So that was a long-winded, I'm not signing up for another video until I get everything on my plate done.
Jeff, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Clarify for me, if a bent knee goes by in a crowd and you're not able to visually yell at him, and he comes around again and he's okay, do you go ahead and yell him for the first time, or do you let him go and he gets a freebie?
Okay, well, first of all, as my mama would say, I wouldn't yell at him. I would project and speak from the diaphragm, because I'm nice. And I guess Gary and I have a slightly different philosophy, and I you know, Gary's saying you would not give the yellow card. I have been, and Gary and I will talk offline about this, I have been saying, hey, last lap, you were bent kneed, because I still think it's educational to the athlete to know they were bent kneed. But Bill Pollinger, who's another high-level official after Penn Relays, he was not actually judging. I think he was the referee. But we had commented about some athletes, and then we looked at the video afterward, and I felt like we were having a rabbinical study, and we were philosophizing about why somebody looked good and somebody looked bad, and there isn't necessarily one right answer, right? So, but I can get back to you after Gary and I philosophize about that tomorrow morning.
John,
Okay.
if that athlete was bent kneed to the point that you saw him bent kneed, would you have given him a red card?
Yes,
Then
But
I would.
but he went by so fast in a crowd, I couldn't give it to him.
Okay. But if you thought the athlete was illegal then, and they had straightened up, I think historically you should give that red paddle, give the red card, and write it as if you wrote it when they were there that first on that lap.
But
when
should you still give them the yellow paddle so they know?
No.
Yes, I would, because the yellow paddle is there to help the athlete. And yeah, you can say, you know, this is for, I guess, Jeff, this is for last lap, and I would,
Yeah.
I don't find anything philosophically wrong with it. But if the
Yeah.
athlete's corrected, I don't know if he's gotten the red cards are up on the posting board, and yours is coming in because you.
Well, you don't know what's on the posting board.
No, you don't. But if you say that you couldn't get it to him, you couldn't get the yellow paddle to him. But if the
Right.
athlete was that bad, write the red card without giving them the yellow paddle.
Well, but if
You
it's
probably
just a-
should have written the red card at that point when you saw him being bent kneed. And so I'm going back now. Would you write a red card if he comes by the second time and he's no longer illegal? I wouldn't. He got away with it.
No,
Because
you
you should have
shouldn't get away with
written it then.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with having to give a yellow paddle before you go to the red card.
If they're blatantly outside the limits of the law.
Give them the
rules,
red card.
Give them the red card.
And most of at least from my experience, now I'm not judging masters and JOs, you know, for the most part. I am judging more elite competitions. In elite competitions, you rarely see somebody blatantly violating the rules, right? So David will smile when I say this. There was a and Diane will know who I'm talking about. There was a young gentleman from Colombia at Penn Relays, and how he made it 3 or 4 laps into the race was shocking to me, because goddamn, sorry, I'm getting stink bugged. He looked so bad to me, I had the red card in by the 2nd lap. And I'm never that kind of official. So yeah, when it's blatant, you give it. But for the most part, I have to look at athletes closely and evaluate them. And again, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I'm not itching to be like, oh, I got to get my red cards in, right? And I'm not rushing to get my card in before David, or David's not rushing to get it in before me, right? We're trying to evaluate. And again, in more elite competition, most people are
Sorry, I should have muted myself.
no worries. Most people are within the definition of race walking, or very close to the definition of race walking. Masters competitions, I think, and JOs, you'll see a very different picture where people are blatantly in violation. And so, yeah, you know, you use your best judgment.
Gary, so to summarize, if you missed the guy the first time around, on the second time around, would it be okay to orally tell him the last lap bent knee, or is that not appropriate?
I personally wouldn't do that,
Okay,
because if it's only for a yellow paddle, the yellow paddles are for the athlete's advice so that they don't get disqualified. If this athlete has corrected himself, then you miss the opportunity to give him a yellow paddle. So I wouldn't give it to him. But I did ask before, if he was really bad, then you probably should have,
Red card.
you should have written the red card
Yeah.
when that happened.
okay.
Not after he's corrected, though, because that becomes, you know, and you have to consider the fact that the posting board is there so the athlete also has an opportunity to correct. The penalty zone is used to give the athlete an opportunity to correct. So if he's already corrected, what are we doing giving him something that's past tense if he has corrected?
If he corrects on the next lap, but maybe 3 laps later, he's in violation again, and you just go straight to a red?
I would, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
But you
all
know,
right,
but if you have not given him the yellow paddle,
right,
give him the yellow paddle and write the red.
okay.
All right.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Anybody else with a question?
I was going to make a comment just in case there's anyone here who's not from the race walking world directly. Diane Graham Henry, who's been talking, is our national chairperson. So kudos. All right, other questions? Marie, you've got a hand up.
Actually, it was supposed to be applause.
Oh,
I'm applauding for Dan.
So I have a question.
shoot.
Can you two and Diane state what you feel makes a good race walking official?
I'll start with appropriate attitude,
Yeah.
right? You've got to go into this with that athletes have, you've heard me say it like 20 times, say it. Give the athlete the benefit of the doubt. You're not here to be the story. You're here to be an insurance that people subscribe to the rules. I think it's important to educate yourself. I think it's important for us to train ourselves and get feedback. So one of the things that is evolving, and I've had very radically different attitudes towards this. Diane and I have been talking, and Gary and David, about putting a camera behind every official at major races. And it's not there to judge the athletes, and it's not even there to judge the judge as much as to help the judge. Okay, so you made these calls. What did you actually see? What caused you to see it? How can you improve your judging moving forward? It can't just be groupthink, because what I have found in races that I have officiated, that I have made incorrect calls, that one judge made the right call. And you could say, oh, only that judge saw it. But when the athlete went by my video each time, there was someone with a very slight bent knee that I didn't see. My defense is 40-mile-an-hour winds, rain and hail that day. But still, right, I did not make the right call. And if I had group thunk it, I would have said, so-and-so made the wrong call because the four of us made the same call. So I think your attitude matters, that you go in. First of all, I think, and I've heard other people say, oh, judging race walking is easy. No, it's not. All right. And you have to have the attitude of continual improvement, that we're going to learn and we're going to tune our eyes to be better and more consistent as a group. And over time, hopefully do the right thing. Now, what I will say is, while I've been officiating, most of the time, the group of officials collectively make the right call, and the right people are disqualified and the right people aren't disqualified. But it would be nice to see a tally sheet where 4 out of the 5 judges, always agreed, or 6 out of the 7 judges agreed. And we're not at that point. So that's my 2 cents. Diane, Gary, Dave.
Diane, did you want to go?
Where am I? I'm trying to unmute.
The question is what makes a good race walking judge?
Oh my gosh. Wait. I gotta put some light on me. I've been judging over 47 years, and I have found that my most important advice to any judge is not to prejudge. It's a new race. I don't care if you know all the athletes. It's a new race. It's got to be a clean slate for everybody. And I think the hard part is to not look at the faces, look at the form, look at their feet, look at their knees, look at the contact, forget whose face it is. It's very difficult for a lot of judges to be unbiased. And we need as much unbiased as possible.
Fair. Gary, you want to pile on?
I've had, I guess, a lot of experience in the world of race walking, having been a race walker, having coached race walkers for a long time, and having judged race walkers at all the different levels that you could possibly judge. And I have found that when I compared myself to some of the other international judges, who I would walk away from a race and say, what did they see? What were they looking at? And then I realized that many of these people who are judging internationally don't have the same experience. They were not race walkers. They didn't coach race walkers. And the only time they ever saw race walkers was when they went to an international competition. We've gotten, the International Federation has created tests that are getting better, and those people are no longer judging at the international level. So now, that having been said, if you've never been a race walker, and you haven't judged race walking, before you start to judge race walking, maybe you should try to find some place where race walkers are practicing, or go to a walking race where there is a race walk, and shadow judge and try to pick the brains of a judge. And I have no problem if someone is standing next to me and I'm judging and they ask me questions about athletes, just as long as they don't tell me what to look for.
Yeah.
And I can point things out to people if it's between the two of us, and it's they're not influencing me, and I'm not really influencing them, but they're gaining experience of looking at walkers and what to look for, because it's really difficult without having seen a race walker to get out there and judge them.
Can I add something? And I don't know if you can hear me. I know there's a lot of officials who work, say, only masters. Different viewing from, say, an elite athlete. And they will not know how to look at the elite athlete because they're at a different level. The same with the juniors or the U20s. There's a different element. And I think the practice, you've got to practice at visualizing or being at those events. And as Gary said, maybe shadow judge at some of those events that you're not used to. Whether it's a fast elites, whole different game. And you got to practice.
Mhm.
So I'm going to pile on to what Diane just said. When I was going around doing race walking training clinics, I would always encourage athletes, oh, John, you're one of them, Maggie, right? Hey, why don't you go to the World Championships and see elite race walking? And it's so different from what, you're used to seeing. And so that, I was dragged into officiating because, we needed younger. I'll put myself in the younger category over here, right? The one group I can be. And, I have experience as an athlete, as a coach, as someone who does analysis, and who's video and photograph walkers at the World Championships, the Olympics, the World Team Championships. So I've got that eye, having seen everything. And I'm going to shift gears for 1 second for a light bit of comedy, but there's a reason I'm showing this. So I want you to look at the race walkers in this animated, humorous clip. And we're going to discuss what you see, and then I'll explain why I'm showing it. And if you haven't eaten dinner yet, I'm sorry.
Does the thought of home-cooked vegetables,
Is the audio going?
marshmallow casserole,
Yeah, but no video.
mile-high potatoes,
Oh, hang on.
golden
Yeah,
turkey?
Hold on.
We heard the audio.
Oh,
Low-impact
Oh,
aerobic
it's on the
sport of
phone.
race walking.
For a more waste.
hang on. You'd think after 3 years of doing this, I'd hit the right screen. Okay. Dun, dun, dun.
Does the thought of home-cooked vegetables, marshmallow casseroles, mile-high potatoes, golden turkey and pie have you planning to gorge yourself this Thanksgiving? Perhaps you should take up the low-impact aerobic sport of race walking for a more waste-friendly holiday.
Okay, so opening it to the floor. Yes, I'll make my money on the late night circuit. What did you notice about the race walkers? What visually did you pick up?
I was looking at the pie.
I understand. All right. So what I will tell you is that one elite race walker took a look at it and said, Jeff, you know what I love? You included tibial torsion in your race walking model. If you look at it, and this, right, David, we played for nights doing that, where the foot kind of whips out and back in. All right. And the reason I'm saying this is that this walker, right, you see how the foot twists around?
We aren't
We need the
seeing it.
video.
Hello.
The video didn't show?
That's
No.
Bruce. That's not the video.
Why does it keep going back to screen one? All right, hang on.
There you go.
No, we're not doing when Santa,
Does
There you go.
for a more
so
waste-friendly
watch the
holiday.
feet. You see how they twist around? And that's what a lot of race walkers do.
Mhm.
So I will highlight this person, and it's Miranda Melville. And then she was the first person we gave the officials test to, and she rocked it out of the park. Right. And the fact that she could look at a cartoon and see that told me immediately she's got the aptitude to be a really good judge. Right. And to Gary and Diane's points, athlete, coach, right? Been around the sport, watched a lot of elite competitions, knows what to look for, right? And you're not judging for tibial torsion, but my theory correlated at least that someone who could pick that up could actually officiate well. So the point is, watch my cartoons all day. It will help your officiate. All right, any other?
I've taught judges for a while, and the biggest problem I have is not getting people to see. It's getting people to have faith in what they see and write it down. Because if I walk around and talk to them about what they saw, they tell me what they saw, and I can't get them to write it down.
So I think that's the importance of shadow judging first to help build that confidence. Then you have to reiterate to them that if they're wrong, they're only one vote. And I don't like to be the chief judge, but Sean Fredericks, who does it by us, is fantastic at getting everything together and getting you that tally sheet, not the tally sheet, the summary sheet, the day of the race. And that is so valuable because as judges, we see, oh, I was consistent with everybody else. And Bruce, one thing that I do personally is even if I'm not making calls, I have a little cheat sheet of paper where I'm writing down the people of what I suspect. And so if I write down number 3, bent knee, but I don't give him a yellow or a red card, and then I see everybody else gave him a bent knee paddle, maybe I should have trusted my gut. Right. So maybe the first 2 or 3 times they don't do what their gut says, but I think if you show them that they're right over time, hopefully that they will improve.
Yeah, but to me, that's the whole purpose of the yellow paddle. The yellow paddle means you're making me nervous and I really don't know. And if I see that you're illegal, that's a red card. A yellow paddle is, I don't know, but man, I sure wonder about this.
Yeah.
So that is true, but internationally, we're also trained that you give a yellow paddle when they're not egregious, but you think they're in violation. So I tend to be a little more hesitant.
The same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
it's a sliding scale. So I am not as quick to give the yellow as some might be. So my cheat sheet might be a little different than somebody else's. But you know, when I look at the video and I look at the calls I make, they tend to correlate. So, and one thing, Bruce, is the same thing like when we teach computer science. You're exposed to different philosophies. We're not all going to have 100% the exact same philosophy on how to do it. But do we get to the same place in the end? And I think that's what's important. Yeah.
Can we expand this then to have Bruce weigh in on what you think makes a good official,
Sure.
race walk official?
So me, it's someone that's willing to take the time to learn what the rules look like when you see. I mean, I agree with that part. But once you see it, you have to write, you have to act. You have to be willing to write down what you saw. And I think race walk judging is the easiest judgment call in track and field. And the reason, if I don't know, I've got a yellow paddle and I'm going to see them again. If you're judging the takeoff board on long jump, you got one shot at it and it doesn't last very long. You got to get it right. So this is easy. Because if you don't know, you yellow paddle them and you wait and see them again.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
I
Jeff,
think
to your point of subjectivity with different judges, that's the beauty of having 4 or 5, 6 judges out there.
Correct.
And, you know, one guy or gal may feel one way and you have a compilation there, so it makes it work.
And usually the panel is correct.
Yeah.
We hope. We hope.
I'm a Star Wars guy. My whole world is hope.
We hope.
You guys did a great job. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, well done. Thank you again for being willing to do this 2 years in a row.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So get out there and judge.
You betcha.
Absolutely.
Get
And if
out
you're-
there and make more judges.
Yes, if you're
Yes.
from the
And
Oregon
Bruce-
Association on this call and you're not a judge, we've got a job for you.
I agree with you, Marie.
And Bruce, hats
New
off
blood,
to you.
new blood, new blood. Yeah.
Bruce, hats off for you for training more judges, because that's what we need.
This was really excellent and I appreciate everything you guys said.
And Jean is one of my judges to be. She's been a lap counter at multiple races, and now she's going to step up and become a race walk official.
Wonderful.
So super excited about that.
We need new blood, new youngsters.
I'm not a youngster, but it's new blood.
We need new blood and youngsters. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you again. Appreciate it
Thank
very,
you.
very much.
Thank you, Gary.
everybody.
Jeff, Everybody, I hope,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Thank
Yes,
you.
you
Nice
too.
job.
Bye.
Everybody's leaving.
Yep, I'm about to stop the recording.
All right.